Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a refreshing break. We would proceed now with our final panel session for LKD Forum 2022. And this time we're going to be essentially showcasing what is possible. So this session will highlight examples of skill development efforts to build resilience in developing countries. And we hope we can draw some lessons from these experiences and learn why it's important to invest in skills. And I'd just like to introduce those who will be participating, if you like, my panel for this conversation. First, I have Kurz, who is the leader of the GIVE program and WorldSkills at GROHE. He's responsible for the GIVE program and everything around WorldSkills in the emerging MENA region. Now, GIVE stands for GROHE's Installer Vocational Training and Education, and it's mainly focusing on collaborating with plumbers and technical schools around the world. Timo, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure's on my side.
We also have David Chakonta. Now, he is the Senior TVET Coordinator at UNIDO. He has over 30 years experience in the TVET sector and having held positions of Technical College Lecturer, Head of Department, Vice Principal, and Principal, and then later on worked for Zambia's Technical Education, Vocational, and Entrepreneurship Training Authority. David, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, listeners.
Thank you for joining us. We also have Simon Schmid. He is a partner at SkillLab and the director of the Just Skills Hub. Simon is passionate about supporting people in their work and life transitions. And before joining SkillLab, Simon was at EY and the Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins. Simon, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you, Wale, and thank you to UNIDO, LKDF, CEDA, and everybody else for setting up this event. It's been great following it the past 24 hours or so.
And we look forward to your contribution. Thank you. We also have Davide Strusani. Mr. Strusani is a principal economist at the International Finance Corporation. He is a senior executive and economist in developing banks and global consulting firms with 20 years of experience. He is a recognized expert on the role of communications and disruptive technology in delivering economic and social growth. David, it's great to have you join us.
Thanks everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
We also have joining us Alexis Hoyaux. He is working as a policy officer, TVET at the European Commission, having worked for bilateral and multilateral organizations with several long-term positions overseas, including in Africa, Oceania, Latin America, and the Caribbean. He focuses mainly on the macro and micro elements of SD with a keen interest on policy strategies. It's a pleasure to have you, Alexis, join us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be again with LKDF as always.
Great to have you. We also have joining us for this Edmond Hajrizi. He's the founder and president of the University for Business and Technology. He is a professor of systems engineering and management. His background is in intelligent systems and mechatronics, computer science, leadership, and management. Edmond, it's great to have you join us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be also here and greet to all. Thank you.
We also have joining us for this Christine Hofmann. Christine works as team lead on skills for social inclusion in the ILO Skills and Employability branch in Geneva. She leads research and knowledge products and builds capacity on skills and lifelong learning approaches that include persons with disabilities, informal economic workers, migrant workers, forcibly displaced people, LGBTI people, and other vulnerable groups. It's a pleasure to have you, Christine, for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm also very happy to greatly improve the gender balance on the panel.
Well, we do have more balance, and I'm delighted to introduce Esther Manila Silipa. She is the country director for Samoa and Tonga, Australia Pacific Training Coalition, that's otherwise known as APTC. She took over the role earlier this year, joining APTC from the Samoa Qualifications Authority, where she served as the Chief Executive Officer. She has a wealth of knowledge in Samoa's post-school education and training, having spent 16 years with the SOA. It's great to have you join. Actually, it's not the SOA, it's the SQA. That's the Samoa Qualifications Authority. It's great to have you join us, Esther.
Talo Falawa. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. And it's good to be a second female panelist.
Indeed.
So definitely there is a gender balance now.
Well, thank you for participating and helping us balance things up a bit. All right, so let's get started. And I think I'm going to start with the APTC, and maybe you can help us appreciate what goes on there at the APTC. I think I'll just leave it open for you to speak broadly. Esther, do you want to go?
Okay. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this year's forum. It's not only to speak on behalf of the Australia Pacific Training Coalition, in short form APTC, but it's also an opportunity to represent the Pacific Islands. I'm not sure whether the panel knows where Samoa and Tonga are, but we are in the South Pacific near New Zealand and Australia. And just a brief background on APTC. APTC is a Australia's flagship vocational educational program in the Pacific. And it has campuses in Samoa, Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, and Timor-Leste. And it was formally established back in 2007 after a strong regional call by our Pacific leaders for a regional TVET training initiative in the Pacific. So we work collaboratively and in partnership with the regional governments, as well as the industries and training institutions, particularly TVET, to develop a more skilled, inclusive, and productive workforce. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. But can you be more specific on how the APTC contributes in building a more resilient workforce, especially against the shocks caused by climate change? Let's focus on that a little bit.
Okay. I would say that climate change and COVID-19, these are the eye-openers to all Pacific Islands. And it prompts the Pacific Islands to put in place strategies to address and to ensure that we are resilient and we have the capacity as well as the capability to adapt and recover quickly from these two challenges. So one of these strategies is to do with skills development or capacity building of our workforce, whereby government agencies have been working together with training institutions as well as APTC to develop training programs to address these challenges in climate change and natural disasters risk mitigation, as well as looking at hard hit, I would say, trade areas that were affected by COVID-19, lockdown and restrictions. since it started back in 2019 to 2020. How did APTC go about it in terms of what are the measures that we have put in place to prepare a more resilient trainers and workers in the Pacific? APTC has conducted labor market surveys, and these were carried out with all the industries, and this is to gauge and to understand their situations. And the findings that were found from these surveys, it helps us determine the needs of both the employers and the employees as well. There were also numerous workshops that were carried out with stakeholders targeting labor market needs. What are the future workforce trends, and identifying the skill gaps. And this is to inform APTC training development with the aim of empowering the labor force to be more resilient. The other areas or the other measures that APTC has put in place is rolling out targeted accredited or non-accredited short courses. And this is to meet the needs of the employers of the workforces. For example, in the Pacific, generally, the industry or the trade that has been impacted the most by COVID-19 as well as climate change is the hospitality and now tourism sector. So we have worked together with them on the skill set that is needed to ensure that the workforce is resilient to all these changes. We have also put in place measures to upskill and reskill the existing workforce, and this is done through taking the trainees out to the workplaces, and working with them to address the need, to address the challenges, to ensure that they continue or they sustain, the workforce. The other thing that APTC, or the other area that APTC has looked into or has responded during this time, it's we have shift from the face-to-face traditional kind of delivery of our training to a more online and digital delivery. And there was a lot of work that was done to repackage the training programs and to accommodate the online delivery mode. While at the same time, APTC has to go through with the training of the trainers to ensure that they are up to they are up with the ICT new technology, while at the same time for them to adapt to the new delivery environment. Adaptability to new training and learning environments, which means that trainers have to be digitalized in their thinking. They have to be computer literate, and they also have to be patient with the new ICT skills that they need to have in order to deliver the online training effectively. While at the same time, the students have to go through the process of adapting to this new delivery mode. But along the ways, there were challenges, like, for example, the accessibilities in terms of IT resources. Pacific Islands are considered developing country. So there's a cost factor in terms of internet cost. And there's also, issue with location. Not all the, the remote or the isolated areas in the Pacific Islands have good internet connection or have connection to the internet. while at the same time it's the ICT capability of the students that enroll with APTC. So the other challenge that we have faced, it's how to deliver. Remember APTC deals with technical and vocational courses. So, theoretically, you can deliver online, but the issue that we have faced is how to deliver the practical components of the TVET courses online. The other measure that we have, as alluded to earlier, is this is the time that we APTC really get into the development of micro-credential courses or qualifications, targeting the industries that were hard hit by COVID, as well as the natural disasters around the Pacific. And we have used this time to upskill and reskill the people in these areas during this time.
If I can just follow up with a question, and if you can speak briefly to this point, and you mentioned the challenge of delivering the practical training. Obviously, it's tough to do that online, but I was wondering how you've been able to innovate and adapt around that.
Okay, we have to resort to to the internet and to Google, YouTube and all those stuff of kind of things to demonstrate the practical side of things, or the practical side of the components of the program. It also get to the points where the trainer has to actually do it, actually do the practical components and record it and send it to the students. It's more like demonstration. Yeah. So that was a major idea that some of the trainers have come up with. But honestly, there was a lot of we have to close down some courses, and now we have just restarted when the borders are opening, and with all the COVID-19 restrictions being relaxed. So the theoretical components have already been delivering, but now we are finishing with the practical components of these courses.
Got it. Well, thank you. I guess you just have to manage the situation the best way you can. But
Yes.
It's great to hear what you're doing. Okay, so let's shift our focus now to the academia. And we'll be hearing about the story of UBT. Now, just to give some background, the University of Business and Technology in Kosovo has been able to create a lifelong learning ecosystem for resilience, innovation, and sustainable development. And it has been recognized. UBT has been ranked 6th among the best universities in the world for its readiness for Industry 4.0 and innovation by the Times Higher Education. So, Edmond, if you can just give us a sense of your strategic goals around resilience, sustainable development, and small-scale ecosystems, and you can tell us how it's is developed and delivered differently at UBT.
Thank you very much. So first of all, the UBT was created in the beginning of 2000 after the crisis in Kosovo, after the war. So we started with a kind of resilience, starting from scratch, and creating an opportunity to support the country here, the population, for new education, especially new skills, which was not able for that kind of close environment for more than 10 years. So we started to act and educate them for robotics in the first years. Even the infrastructure was not here, or for mechatronics, or for many other skills that we say and we consider there is a breakthrough to come to real needs and to have an impact on society. And now after 20 years, we have really a kind of positioning where we have as not just to act on national level, but regional, but also to see where we can reflect according to the to the international global development. And as you know, we are in a so-called knowledge area and in a knowledge convergence revolution. And in the convergence revolution, the complexity of competences are increased more than in information society revolution or in the industrial revolution and so on. So you need to have this complex thinking. You need to have this system of system, knowledge of knowledge. They're quite an interesting approach to confirm or to answer to the needs that they are coming. The digitalization, the green area, planet, global challenges that we have, and so on. In this case, I thought it would be nice to create a kind of small scale system, because my background is in system engineering, and this is also for me a kind of designing systems, designing policy, and be able to reflect on this part. We see that the next point is very much on this area, how to create a small, smart, sustainable, innovation-based ecosystem. And this is the point where we consider creating such an innovation-based ecosystem with the smart competences and based on the sustainable development area, we can quite reflect and support the right skills or the next skills or the future skills or future generation that we are looking for it. And based on this, we try to create a small city, a kind of example of area in a science and technology park where you have all kind of functions, let's say, of life, living area, healthcare, food, environment issues, infrastructure, business, media, and so on, and of course education on the part, and linking with the smart components like 5G, virtual reality, cyber concept, and so on, and of course all those things to have an impact on issues like quality of life, jobs, growth, sustainability, security, innovation, and so on. So a small area with different functions, interaction where then education can be in place and people can generate this, let's say, framework and getting the competences for system of system, knowledge of knowledge. So in a place where you can see how things are moving in area of digitalization and smart systems, which are the next component, and very not easy to reflect what does mean smart systems if you don't have a framework for smart system and real-time capability and so on. How you will reflect on virtual and metaverse, where you can be confronted in the next year very much as a users or jobs, skills, and so on. So in this case, and also how you reflect in climate change, in environment, in sustainable development, and really how you can see the impact. So this is what we did we call this smart, sustainable, innovation-based ecosystem university, which then is not just a university, is not a system of just academia, is an ecosystem of education in a horizontal, vertical approach from kindergarten to lifelong learning, but of course with the potential that academia bringing there, with 150 different areas of let's say skills or fields or whatever we can consider. And then the next innovation ecosystem is made from research infrastructure, from innovation system, and an industrial park. And we see that there is quite an interesting impact. For example, last year we generated 1,000 new jobs, only 1 year in a small area with, let's say, less than 5 hectares area. But that you see, so what we are making a proposition is how to create this small self-sustain, and then maybe duplicate and reflect on resilient, sustainable development with the content, of course, on innovation-based ecosystem. And even the beginning, but as of now, there are global challenges. There are not institutional-based challenges. And in this, you need as a cooperation with different stakeholders in a local level, but as an international level with government, with industry, with international organization, being able to to reflect on this part. For example, with UNICEF, we create here social innovation lab, where we interact social problem statements in Kosovo and trying to use with students and staff to do this. Or for example, with University of Cambridge, we create a joint center for public policy simulation lab for resilience and sustainable development, where we train people on the government to be better, let's say, simulator of public policy related with the resilience, so getting better skills and working more on resilience environment, which is very, very interesting. Or for example, creating the entire 5G campus, because 5G is a level of technology that you can reach the real-time capabilities and see what does mean in real-time decision making, which skills should be developed, and you should be able to reflect in the future for smart system. So this was the first 5G campus in the region of Adria and Western Balkan, but this creates for us a very good environment, an ecosystem where we can, as a touch, smart systems, smart hospitality, smart agriculture, treat in different aspects. And of course, not forget, this is the most component, the quality of life, the sustainable development, which is the framework, and then measuring this part. So this is what we try to do, because sometimes in developing countries or new countries, building a new system is much more easy rather than creating a new re-engineering a system. So in this case, we try to start from scratch in a green field, but based on the best practice, and trying to see if those best practices in transition country can have an impact. And I think we are trying to confirm this, that this makes sense.
Right. Very quick question. You mentioned you've been able to create 1,000 new jobs. Can you just describe at a very high level the type of jobs we're talking about here? Because you said it was within a small area.
Yes, in a small area, but in small area, there are more than 80 different spin-offs or companies working around university UBT. Okay. For let's say ICT, for healthcare issues, for agriculture, for a specific areas. So we have 150.
What is the attraction? Sorry to cut in. What is the attraction to the university for these businesses that make them spring up around you? What exactly?
First of all, the building the system, and the same time having a good competence with the students, who they are able to offer the right competence that they are needed for the market. There is a leverage where you create a framework where then this interaction industry, academia is working, and then you create a lot of jobs opportunities, because we succeed to increase the interest of international companies and local to come in this area and open their offices or their let's say functions where they hired people and create more jobs. So this is what we call small scale innovation ecosystem, a kind of city area which you have different parts. So, and if you see the value map of stakeholders, you can see what are the benefits of students, which was the main motivation for us. Is the students, not just the theoretical part and simulation part has inside of the university, but they have as the industrial part within the area of this science and technology area, which is very important for them to see. For example, the students of medicine having a hospital inside and polyclinic where they can treat and contact in the campus the patients. Or you go from the area of computer science where you have a software big or different software companies, and then you can work, like you can experience the life cycle of a software development or mobility or smart infrastructure and so on. Or you go to the agriculture part where you have greenhouses, you can food production and food processing, and then you take part within. So in the same time, industry get a benefit to have talent people in a very close area and interact with them. So there is a win-win situation, and we believe that for answering the next part, the complexity of kind of innovation ecosystem is needed. Otherwise, it's not easy that you are focused in one segment and then you cannot reflect, or you need extra cooperation, coordination for this convergence knowledge, which is, I think, the momentum to interfere, like interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity or such a things.
Got it. Thank you very much for that, Edmond. And we'll certainly come back to you. And I'll just, at this point, would like to reiterate to our audience that if you do have any specific questions as we go through this showcase of the variety of impact that we're seeing as different institutions build resilience, please feel free to type them in the comments section, and we certainly will be posing those questions to our panelists. Moving on now, let's examine what UNIDO is doing in Liberia. And David, thank you again for joining us. You are the one that you coordinate a UNIDO project in Liberia on TVET. How is UNIDO supporting Liberia towards creating a resilient TVET ecosystem?
Thank you very much, Wally, and my colleagues and all our viewers and listeners following us across the globe. UNIDO in Liberia is actually working with the government of Liberia involving two ministries. Because TVET the TVET policy in Liberia is shared between the Ministry of Youth and Sport and the Ministry of Education. Now, in terms of the TVET ecosystem for Liberia, I think the parameters have been defined by two government of Liberia policies, which is the National TVET Policy and also the Pro-Poor Agenda for Prosperity and Development. Now, these two have defined the parameters in which TVET has to operate. Then UNIDO is actually implementing two projects interrelated. One project, and they call the Youth Rising Project, is funded by the European Union and involves UNIDO working with 7 technical schools and 3 vocational training centers. The technical high schools are under Ministry of Education, and the vocational training centers are under the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And then the government of Sweden, under the Promoting Youth Employment through TVET project, are supporting 1 technical high school under the Ministry of Education. So we have 10 in all. And both projects are more or less vehicles, special purpose vehicles for implementing the government of Liberia policies and focused on strengthening the national TVET system, because Liberia is rebuilding the TVET system after the civil war and the Ebola problem that followed just the civil war. So the country is rebuilding from there, and this is how the cooperation between the government of Liberia, the European Union, the government of Sweden, and UNIDO sort of came about. Now, in terms of what we are doing, and we have done already as UNIDO, vis-a-vis laying a foundation for a resilient TVET ecosystem, we have facilitated the adoption of an international best practice conceptual model of a TVET system. And we did this through a desk study that we did in 2019, where we did an international benchmarking of 9 countries from Africa, involving the 3 trading blocks, the ECOWAS, which is for West African countries, the East African community, and the SADC community in the southern part. And we're basically looking at the TVET systems of these countries. Then we also had a reference, the member states of WorldSkills International, their TVET systems. And out of that, we came up with an idea of systems like a photograph or a drawing of a house that you want to build. It's not yet there, but that's your aspiration. So UNIDO facilitated that, and that's the model that we are using in our interventions. So out of that, then we came up with a human resource development plan for TVET staff training involving both instructional staff and management staff. All this training actually was about to start in 2020, and then COVID came in. And I think that was one shock that kind of tested the resilience, first of all, the project, but also by implication of the Liberian TVET system. So we adopted online training for both the instructors and the TVET managers. And we struggled in the initial phase. And for the TVET instructors, for example, we now, and I think for both, even the staff, we had to procure about 200 laptops that we distributed to the schools as well as to the individual instructors so that they can participate in the online training courses. Now, that forced us also to have an enabling intervention. When we did the baseline assessment in terms of ability to use ICT for online learning, we found that some respondents were overstated their abilities, and when they received the actual laptop, then they didn't know how to maybe switch it on or switch it off. And so we had to have those interventions. So once we did the first intervention in terms of the basic ICT skills training for a new group of instructors, about 82 that had been recruited just for this purpose of strengthening TVET, then we saw their participation in the online courses that were already running just rise up. And so out of that, we have facilitated training for about 200 staff, pre-service TVET teachers, as well as those that are already in the schools. And we shopped around, we found some programs that were suitable for Liberia and that we could latch on. Then the third part has been the adoption of common tools and standards for TVET curriculum and qualification standard development. We had to adopt them between the two ministries that we are working with, but also other donors that are working in the TVET sector. Because apart from UNIDO, we also have the IECD under the French government. Then we also have GIZ under the German government as well as the European Union. So amongst ourselves, we have agreed to adopt common tools and common standards as we work to strengthen one common system. So we have regular coordination meetings where we agree and just exchange notes and agree on common activities and complementary activities. Then we, as UNIDO, we have facilitated the establishment of a TVET Center for Professional Training, Research and Innovation. This is the first center for training TVET instructors in Liberia. There has never been one before. And so individual institutions have been using their own initiatives to train their instructors and of course the consequence of that is that you have very varied standards. So we have facilitated establishment of that. The infrastructure preparation of it ended at the end of March this year. And then my team, as training coordination team, are on site now to develop the working systems for the center. So we are dovetailing the online training that we've been doing from 2020 into this center. And then we are just about to start training 10 initial group of TVET teacher trainers with the help of a university from Finland. And this particular training will do two things. Apart from training the initial group of TVET teacher trainers, we also want to develop one pre-service teacher curricula and one in-service teacher curricula and pilot them as part of the training. And so with this, then we think we will establish a kind of foundation for a resilient TVET system for Liberia. The last kind of innovation that we are working on is to develop what we are calling the skills competition enabled simulated work-based learning system. This is where we want to use production units in schools as microeconomies and simulate the workplace. Because when you look at the economy of Liberia and the socio-economic setting, 60% of the population of Liberia are youth. And then when you have a TVET system, you can't place them in industry because there's not sufficient that can absorb all of them. And secondly, to also make TVET a bit more attractive, if you inject in skills competition, it's like they'll play and learn. And hopefully that way, it's a bit attractive for the young people. So
yes,
these are the
David,
interventions
so sorry
that
to jump in, David. I see you're giving us quite some detail, and we really appreciate it. But in the interest of time, if you could just try to round it up.
I'm actually done.
Okay. Okay. Oh, you're done?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. My apologies for jumping in as you were finishing then. But thank you for that, for the insight you provided into what you're doing. Really important work, no doubt, in Liberia. And I'm sure our audience are learning quite a bit from that. Let's now move over to the IFC. And now we want to discuss EdTech. It has become a huge thing in the post-COVID era. And TVET systems also need this, if you like, innovation to learning. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, David, on this. What are the benefits of applying EdTech in skills development in the TVET context?
Thanks, and thanks again for the opportunity to be here today. So the IFC, first of all, is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So this means that we invest in private sector companies in emerging markets. And an area of investment that has been growing exponentially for us is what we call disruptive technology. So this means we take early stage investments, typically venture capital, in startups that use digital or other technologies as a key way of scaling services. Disruptive technologies are obviously becoming more and more critical to economic resilience. We saw this throughout the COVID pandemic. And a key area of investment for us has been in EdTech platforms, as well as in digital platforms that support the upskilling and reskilling of the labor force. So I'm going to focus today on what we've learned from these engagements. The first lesson is about the importance of technologies to maintain resilience of TVET systems. So EdTech solution became a key component of remote learning frameworks. Early evidence shows that EdTech solutions tended to fare better in the pandemic. And EdTech is also expected to play an important role in helping to address the cumulative learning losses that have been built up over the last couple of years. Yet, too many developing countries are still deprived of the diffusion of technologies in their TVET systems, thereby threatening their resilience and creating employability challenges for workers and productivity issues for businesses. The second key lesson is that governments alone cannot fill this technological gap in their TVET system. So how can we harness private sector EdTech solution to solve this problem? Well, in fact, at the IFC, we are seeing a rising number of private sector-led solutions that can accelerate the diffusion of technologies in TVET systems. This solution can deliver several impacts: access, quality, and relevance. Let me go through one by one. On access, EdTech can provide increased access to education at reduced costs. So free of charge and standardized massive open online courses, MOOCs, such as those offered by Coursera, a former investee of IFC, enable millions of students to pursue certifications by simply leveraging their access to a connected device. On pedagogical and curriculum innovation or quality, EdTech offers a way to customize learning experience and embed global education standards. For example, Duolingo breaks language learning into interactive and gamified microlessons to improve learner motivation. And there are a lot of EdTech models that leverage partnerships with international universities and that can also enable low-capacity emerging markets to integrate into global learning standards. Finally, in terms of skill relevance and labor market matching, so upskilling and reskilling, this is a critical benefit that we see. EdTech can leverage big data to identify key trends and future skill requirements to support the development of most in-need skills. For example, in Brazil, Revelo, an IFC invested company, has built a platform that uses artificial intelligence to provide upskilling recommendation to job seekers, increasing their chance to get employed and improve their wage. B2B edtech platforms and higher education platforms such as Upgrad also tend to collaborate with industry partners and match data from employers with worker skills to identify relevant educational content. There are several edtech models that combine upskilling with local job matching or talent exporting that have also emerged. For example, in Nigeria, Andela has trained and successfully placed more than 1,000 software engineers from Sub-Saharan Africa to work remotely with top global tech companies. And there are other platforms that focus on low-skill talent exports, which typically involve labeling the training data sets for AI algorithms. Examples include companies like SamaSource and Cloud Factory. But what is the effectiveness of these solutions? So by being more cost-effective, scalable, and flexible, edtech has proven to address more individuals, including populations that otherwise would not have access to learning opportunities. For example, Coursera has addressed over 100 million learners. Duolingo has trained over 300 million people globally. There are also positive social outcomes. IFC has just published a study done with Coursera on the gender impacts of online learning. And we found that online learning is perceived as more accessible than in-person education for women due to the flexibility and lower funding requirements. And we also found that around half of women respondents indicated that they would postpone studying or not studying at all if online learning was not an option. Another very recent survey that we've done with an edtech platform in Bangladesh indicated that around 30% of learners were from families living below the national poverty line, spanning across rural and urban areas. We also find that integrating edtech into traditional TVET effectively improves learning outcomes. There is a large meta-study that finds that computer-assisted learning programs and tutoring software have been especially effective in supporting the development of cognitive skills, such as maths. They tend to be particularly effective in developing countries with the right digital infrastructure and ICT readiness of the teaching staff in place. Finally, early evidence finds that blended models that pair online off-the-job training with offline on-the-job learning can be a cost-effective model of delivering TVET. But there are areas where outcomes remain to be proven. And so while platforms that combine online education with talent matching provide an effective means to guarantee employability, more research needs to be done to understand the labor market outcome of edtech in TVET system. The research on the ability of edtech to provide individuals with better work opportunities and improve livelihood remains nascent, but the fact that edtech can instantly register and connect data presents an important opportunity for TVET systems to track such critical outcomes in real time. So in conclusion, how can private sector, governments, and TVET systems work together to try to unleash this potential? And how do we scale edtech solutions within emerging markets? Well, private sector edtech solutions have this potential, and they have the potential to close skill gaps, but they will require the availability of several enabling conditions to unlock their potential. These include government partnerships, digital infrastructure, access to funding, and talent. Let me review each quickly. On government partnerships, they have a key functions, and in particular, there are two areas that we see as critical. The first one is encouraging international providers to scale in emerging markets, working with edtech platforms to optimize curricula, develop capacity of trainers and teachers to use edtech, and strengthen accreditation processes for online certification. For example, the Indian government has started to acknowledge and accredit online degrees offered by traditional education institutions through platforms such as Upgrad. On digital infrastructure, edtech models obviously cannot flourish if the digital infrastructure and the broader digital ecosystem do not exist. Hence, investing in ICT infrastructure and encouraging smartphone adoption remain foundational. Access to funding is another critical one, and for us, it's a key area of work. So emerging markets are not receiving sufficient funding to support edtech. In particular, there's a lack of access to venture capital needed to scale early stage ventures. And finally, talent and local edtech platforms and international platforms that scale to emerging markets require the availability of digital skills and entrepreneurial talent. This talent base, in turn, should be supported by a broader technology ecosystem that involves accelerators, industry partnerships, and other networks to ultimately help edtech thrive and deliver on its development impact potential. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive. I mean, so much to unpack there. And I would also like to mention to the audience that you can watch a repeat of today's and yesterday's event by simply clicking on the repeat button, which you should find to the left of the screen. So look for that and you get an opportunity to soak all of this in again. Thank you again, David, for that. All right, so let's now talk a bit about skill acquisition. And Simon, I'm coming to you now. And I think what we've learned over the last 3 years is that we need to anticipate and understand skills that would be relevant in the future. We learned that the hard way, if you like, with the pandemic. So let's talk about building skill systems. What have you learned in terms of the best approach to this?
Yeah, thank you, Wale. For us, really, at SkillLab, we believe that the first step in building a skill system and in ensuring that the skill system is resilient, whether we're looking at anticipating skill needs or building comprehensive, encompassing systems, is really recognizing and highlighting, first and foremost, the skills of the individual, and then in the aggregate, look at what the available skills within society are. So rather than immediately focus on the skill demand, look at the skill supply first. So really, when we've been facing these ongoing and massive society-wide changes, the way we often currently look at what people are capable of, like job titles and resumes, are often not enough to really fully understand what people are capable of, because they're not transferable across roles, they're not transferable across industries, and they convey very little information as to what the true capabilities, skills, and competencies of people really are. So first and foremost, we advocate for a more granular view of people's skills and their capabilities, which then enables us to build on people's skill set and ensure that people's potential is not wasted. So really, primarily a good granular understanding of the status quo and of skills of people is the basis for everything else, including anticipating skill needs and building skill systems. In our work at SkillLab, to explain what we do a little bit, we provide artificial intelligence-based solutions that enable people to recognize their skills, access education, and ultimately access the labor market and jobs. We work with partners and organizations, including some people that are here. Hi, Christine. We work with the ILO, for example. And really to make career guidance and information about the labor market accessible to the individual and ensure that individuals and workers can turn their skills into sustainable careers. So meeting people where they are and with the means available to them is really important to us. Once you really look at how can you best support the individual in their learning and work journey and in the transitions that they face, whether they're green, digital, unexpected events like a pandemic, you get to the point where once you understand the individual both by themselves and in the aggregate, you can look at how do you build upon that individual skill set and how do you build upon the skills that are available within society to address and anticipate those future skill needs, because it's very, very difficult to say like, oh, these are the skills that will be in demand 5 years from now. But it is the baseline, a really basic function there is understanding what the skills that are currently available are.
Thank you very much. Really useful insight. I really like the point about looking at the skill supply first before you begin to think about building on that. I think it's a very important point. Thank you for that. Okay, Alexis, I'll be coming to you next. And let's talk about partnerships. It's always, as it's often said, you can go further together. And in trying to develop these skills, the skill sets that are needed to be resilient for organizations and individuals, I want to hear what you're learning at the EU, the European Commission, on on doing that. So let's talk about partnerships. How is that working for you?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wole, and for the invitation for me to be here. Again, for me, this is a kind of family. Let me just introduce to you where I come from. Actually, I am an employee of Luxembourg Lux Development, which is a bilateral donor from Luxembourg. I'm posted for this time being at the European Commission, at DG International Partnerships, important word. Actually, I started working with ILO already in 2015 with the International Training Center, where we already come together because we do have all this added value. Next to that, with UNESCO, we organized several kind of meetings on PPPs, on public-private partnerships. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yeah.
On public-private partnerships, thanks to an intervention called vettoolbox.eu. I just put it also in to see what is there. And all that all together brings us to LKDF UNIDO. I mean, we have been working with the Learning Knowledge Development Facility already since 2015. We have been in meetings in Casablanca, in Morocco, with the CETAT project. We have been with Festo in Stuttgart. We have been with UNIDO in Vienna, all to see that there is so much knowledge already available. And that's for us as a small donor from Luxembourg, but also for a big donor as the European Commission. We have to work together. And there are so many good practices that we see that, okay, with this and that, we put it together and then we advance. So this is, as an introduction, I wanted to say that we have a lot of knowledge around the table, and I really salute all of you because I'm very happy to meet old ones, but to meeting new ones, because we'll definitely work together. Now, on the PPPs, public-private partnership, on a yearly basis, UNIDO, LQDF, they organize these meetings of all these kind of projects all over the world. This is at the micro level, at the level of a vocational training center. And that's important to remember. Those training centers are very autonomous, very independent, and they reach out to employers. I do think that is very important. And this, of course, is inspiring for all countries. With all due respect, you can talk about PPPs at a micro level of the ministries of labor, education, and that's fine and that's necessary. But it doesn't always trickle down to the local level of vocational training centers. And it's there where LQDF, UNIDO, it's there where ILO and all the organizations are insisting, give them more autonomy to reach out to the private sector. I think that is very important to visualize. Next to that, also was mentioned a couple of times, what about the financing? The financing of these interventions, true, it will be partly done by donors, whether it's financial or technical, but there's also there where we see in sub-Saharan Africa a tendency of national training funds. And these training funds, they finance and they support PPPs, public-private partnerships. So it's like a win-win situation. And government of Ivory Coast, they want to see youngsters into jobs. And that's what we all want to see. Then, of course, it's a quid pro quo. We'll give a budget to a certain PPP, but show us the results. And that's, I think, is also one of the key elements that we see now with these training centers, is that a director of a training center, he or she must know how many youngsters get into jobs, whether as independent or as an employee. And to that extent, I'll just give a small specific case. Thanks to LQDF UNIDO in CETAT in Morocco, I'm saluting Max Pierotti on this moment, they set up an intervention called AGVEC, which is so good, so well organized in Morocco, which really, they got their merits very clear. So what we do now, together with UNIDO, in Senegal, we put up a similar kind of initiative. But there, it's the director of the training center who has a more independent, a more advanced role. This training center is called for the professions of the harbor and the logistics, FCMFPL. And there you see exactly, they reach out to all the private companies in the harbor, but also thanks to UNIDO, with their huge amount of multinationals in the organization, they come on board too. So meaning, for instance, Volvo, they're on board, and we're making a one intervention now in Senegal with some training centers and with multinationals and local enterprises. And then I go maybe to the newest thing on PPPs. Actually, legally speaking, you have two kind of PPPs. You have organizational PPPs and you have educational PPPs. What do I mean with that? The educational PPPs is where you have a public vocational training center with a director, which is a civil servant or somebody from the government, and they operate with private companies around the training center. They reach out, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in the industrial sector, and they work together. This can start very small, but they can grow big. And I do think that most of the LKDF PPPs, PPDPs, as they have, are about educational PPPs. But now you have also the other one, the operational PPPs. What I mean with that is where the government of a country says, we have infrastructure, we have equipment, but we do not have the know-how to run this training center. So this is given to a private company. And this private company operates on behalf of the government, but they operate it as a private company. And actually there are about 6 legal contracts for minimalistic PPPs to maximalistic PPPs. And this is very interesting. And actually, the case of the professions in the harbor and the logistics in Senegal, it's what we call, it's the third contract, it's a public service leasing. Just to name you very quickly, the simple one is a simple contractualization between government and a private company. Afterwards, you have the public authority. Then you have the public service leasing. In French, you call it contrat d'affermage. Then you have the public service concession. Then you have the administrative long-term lease. And then the biggest one is build, operate, transfer, where a company builds, operate, transfer, and brings it back to the government. And I do see that the results in this kind of sector centers of vocational training, they give good results. Good results, very concrete, very demand-driven. It's really not supply-driven. Results of youngsters into jobs. So I'm very, very happy to see that coming up and getting stronger all the time. What I also wanted to say, these PPPs, this is not about a private company doing charity. This is not about charity. This is not even about corporate social responsibility. When I talk to Volvo, are you interested to work together with a training center in Senegal? Of course, for economical profit. So it's not about charity, and I really underline it. I'm not against charity, of course not, but this is really a win-win situation. There must be profit. There must be profit for the company. So I think I will leave it there. And yes, maybe I forgot one donor, and that would not be good to forget. It's AFD, the French Development Agency. They are also really champions in this kind of operational PPPs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexis. That covers obviously a very wide area, and the partnerships that you've described, I think, are things that we can all think about and see how we can adopt in our various countries. Let's now go to Timo, still building on the theme of partnerships. I understand that GROHE has recently joined forces with WorldSkills as a global partner and embarked on a new initiative. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that, and how does it contribute to building the skills for a more resilient workforce?
Yes, of course, very grateful to do that. So first of all, I would answer, I guess, in 2 directions. Yeah, first of all, you introduced in the beginning already our GIF program, which stands for GROHE, Installer Vocational Training and Education. And the second part I would then relate to the WorldSkills partnership and initiative, what we are doing there. Yeah. So most of you may know us as a global brand. We are a manufacturer of sanitary bathroom and kitchen solutions. Yeah, and with this GIF program, the overall aim is to educate and train more skilled workers. Yeah, because we all know there's a global need for that in these unprecedented times. So what are we basically doing? We are offering schools like technical schools, plumber schools, like a training rack, where all our products are on, so that they can really train, maintain, doing hands-on training on this one. And in addition to that, offering all our kind of technical expertise, technical knowledge to the schools in terms of additional training material. So we offer workbooks to the schools. We offer video tutorials that we are just about to be creating. And we are also offering, in addition to that, which also closes a bit of the resilience gap, is online trainings. Train the trainers. So one key person for us always would be the teacher on site, because if we would not have the teacher, let's say in our field, then we can forget about everything, because the teacher is the person that conveys the whole knowledge and information then to the students downwards. So and at the end, so let's say in addition to everything, what we would offer is, there is a kind of a certification and examination that we also developed. So there are also some kind of certificates going on. But what is really important to mention is that we, as a manufacturer, as from the private sector, we don't want to infiltrate a TVET system or an educational system, but we see really our offer as a complementary modules to what is already there. So because if you have then a kind of a training rack or a hands-on option in your classroom, in your school, why would you not use it? Just as an example. And when let's say the student is graduating or has a kind of a certificate in the hand, this is not where it ends for us. So we really want to make it, we want to see it end to end. That means we really want to follow through the student to say offer additional employment options and opportunities with our partners, maybe also with the customers. So really going through the whole kind of cycle. So not only stopping at the graduation, hat is on, and then we say goodbye, but we really want to follow through the career and make it very, very sustainable in that case. What I wanted to mention is, I mean, clearly we are operating in Europe, but one of our focus regions is also Northwest Africa. So today, as we speak, in Morocco, for example, we are activating the Second Hope School close to Casablanca. So really opening kind of the training room and classroom there today. Also, what's worth mentioning is in the example of Benin, we are collaborating with SOS Children's Villages. So there is also the specialty that we are starting with the very basic plumbing skills. So really not for those people who don't really have a background on the sanitary industry, on all the knowledge and technology, we are starting there. And also adding some kind of entrepreneurial modules. So if a student at the end of the tuition of the classes would think about opening up her or his own business, this could also be an option for them. So really adding also and increasing the options that somebody would have for future employability itself. The other topic would be Cameroon. So Cameroon is a country where we also have the special situation that we are building a schoolhouse from scratch. So this is also being funded by Develop PP, by the German government, and also by DEG as well. And the same applies here. We want to start with the basic plumbing skills, educating in average, let's say 50 students kind of per school year, and then accompanying them into their future. So right now we are at today, what I mentioned, Morocco would be the 56th school that we have activated. We plan to have 100 schools activated by 2025. So you see, we are really on a very good track here. So as a summary for this part, I would say we have let's say we want to offer the product expertise, the knowledge also on the technology, but really also what is really important for us, adding these entrepreneurial modules in also order to make let's say the students as resilient as possible for any future developments. The second part that I wanted to mention is on the WorldSkills. So we are very proud and happy to be also a global industry partner since April this year. And this, of course, opens also for us up a huge network of contents and access to educational kind of institutions, Foreign Chamber of Commerce, and so on, and other educational partners, which is really great. And I'm very grateful to be also part of this round. As a result of the partnership, and we are even more, let's say, happier and proud to host this year's the WorldSkills special edition in our own premises, for the skill plumbing and heating. So this shows again also our, I guess, big and great ambition to also showcase that we want to set a global training standard, that we want to increase the educational sector here, especially for the sanitary industry. So we will be hosting 20 international contestants from all over the world in less than 2 weeks' time. So you see also in the comments section the link, and would be more than happy to welcome a lot of the audience and participants to meet in Lahr in Germany, in the beautiful area of the Black Forest.
Well, thank you very much for that invitation. Okay, we need to move on now to Christine. And Christine, we've left out the small businesses, so we're saving it for last, and we hope that you can tell us a little more about how the ILO has developed a framework for governments to support small businesses in developing countries. What are the key policy options that you can offer?
Thank you very much, Wole, and once again, thanks for the invitation, and really a great pleasure to be among all of you and among many friends and partners. Also, WorldSkills is a partner, a long-standing partner of the ILO, so very nice to hear from GROHE. I would like to respond to your question on the key policy options for small businesses, but I'd also like to speak a bit to what are resilience and inclusive skill systems for the ILO, and I'd like to give one country example where sort of some of this work has come together. Can you hear me?
Yes, I said we like examples, so please share.
Good. Okay. So on the small enterprises, clearly with all the crises and growing crises the world is facing and has faced through the past years, small enterprises are much more vulnerable to them because of a plethora of reasons. I mean, their access to finance and the lower skills of their workforce, productivity and capabilities, lower negotiation ability, and overall also a more vulnerable workforce. So governments have designed or have at their hand a plethora of mechanisms, and investing in skills is clearly among them. But let me take you sort of into the broader picture. So on the one hand, there are the crisis management responses, but then on the other hand, there are some that look more at the long-term business resilience, and I think we always have to look at both sides. So during the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of tracking, and the ILO and the World Bank and others have assessed policies around the world. And so clearly, the large majority of the measures that governments have put in place were targeting financial stability and liquidity, so 70% of all measures. Around 25% of measures addressed supporting employment continuity and adaptation within companies. And among those measures, you find compensation and reduce salary costs or extended social protection, but you also find support to skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. And so this is where governments also invested in distance learning. We've heard that from the Pacific as well, specific voucher programs targeting people in small companies. So these have really been attempts to use those crises to invest in the capabilities of small businesses, strengthening their crisis reactivity, but then also their business resilience in the longer term. So the ILO designed guidelines on rapid assessment of reskilling and upskilling needs in response to COVID, and is used in several countries. And clearly, small businesses also face this this challenge. I mean, they need to do training needs assessment of their own staff, and then manage to find the right skills provision for that. And they need to overcome all the barriers the businesses themselves, but also their workers might face in accessing training. And so the key recommendations within a study that I think will be shared in the chat is that those government measures really work best when they're combined and mixed with other measures, and when they build on the whole ecosystem. And we talk a lot about skills ecosystems, right? So the way companies and TVET providers and employment services and non-formal skills providers, academia, etc., work together. And we've already heard from some colleagues on this. So making sure that all these partners come together to help the adaptation and the resilience capabilities within companies within small business is really key. Right. So in addition to those small business sort of strategies, when we look at skills systems overall, what is it that makes those skills systems resilient? Governance is a very important one, and financing. Alexis talked about it. From an ILO point of view, governance always needs to be tripartite. So we need to have employers and workers and their organizations involved in order to ensure that all perspectives from a training and labor market perspective are included. We need to understand what the different barriers are, so that skill systems can make communities as well more resilient, and can address equity issues within. In addition to governance, or as part of governance, skills anticipation is very important, and the ILO is partnering with the EU as well under the Skills Initiative for Africa on this topic. Being prepared for climate changes, digital revolution, etc. All of it is extremely important for a more resilient and a more inclusive skills system. So getting to the country case that you were looking for, in Kenya, we have worked with the Kenya Technical Teacher Training College on strengthening their teachers' capacity to see TVET as a means to promote social cohesion, address conflicts in society, and really foster TVET's role in peaceful coexistence and in strengthening sort of social inclusion. So this has happened through a tool that's also shared and some capacity building, and so this is now integrated into the mainstream TVET curricula. So the capacity of teachers is very important. We're also working with the Juakali Association, so the Association of Informal Economy Operators, so small businesses, and the master crafts people who usually lead these small businesses, to ensure that the training that happens within these small businesses, we talk of informal apprenticeship, is fully considered as part of the skills system, so that the trainers within the system, the master craftsperson, receive access to skills, upgrading new technologies, etc., and also have a possibility to have their skills recognized through a recognition of prior learning. So in our view, these are all multiple measures that can be taken to make societies, workers, enterprises more resilient and ultimately more inclusive and more socially just. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. A very comprehensive overview of what you're doing over there at the ILO. And that essentially covers all our speakers for today. Before we wrap, I just want to take a couple, well, we do have one question that I can share. And I'll go back to you, Christine, for this one. And Fabian is asking, what can be done to ensure Africa leverages its demographic advantage, so its teeming young population, to drive digital skills revolution, provide decent jobs, so speaking to the SDG 8, and thrive in the future of work? So it's quite a bit in there, but just would like to hear your thoughts on this. What can be done to ensure that we leverage that demographic advantage?
Thank you very much for the question. I don't know how much time you have.
Not too much, but maybe
let me maybe make one more comment. I mean, generally, youth employment is a huge issue for the African continent, and to make youth employment work, we need to work both on the supply side and on the demand side, hence stimulating as well entrepreneurship and stimulating the demand on the business side, and work on good labor market intermediation, and hence also on partnerships. The ILO promotes SDG 8 and social justice and decent work through our international labor standards. And so currently we have a discussion that happened this year at the International Labour Conference and next year on a new recommendation on apprenticeships. And so apprenticeships, both in the informal economy and in the formal economy, so quality, what we call quality apprenticeships, are a very strong lever to get skilling into companies and to get skills developed that are relevant for the world of work. And the digital skills revolution is also very important in that context, so that through digital means, people in the informal economy, for example, informal apprentices, can much more easily access any additional learning because it's readily available. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen on the system to make sure the right technical, the right skills are available. People know about it. They can access, have the devices, etc. But that's important. And what's also important for the digital skills revolution is, on the one hand, digital literacy, so that people are able to benefit from this. We still have in least developed countries only 20% of the population actually connected to internet, and have the capacity of trainers to use these new technologies and teach people.
Thank you. I wonder if, okay, I can see a hand up. Go ahead, please.
No, definitely. Just
to be really brief, because we have to wrap shortly. Go ahead.
Just to finish what Christine just said, at the local level of the public-private partnership and the vocational training center, we already have cases in some countries where the director of a training center is working together with European company, with local companies to get on to advance in this topic, and also meaning following up with those youngsters leaving the vocational training center after the training. So again, if you do decentralized, if you give autonomy to training centers, you will be surprised how much can be done.
And you know, the point about digital skills, I see it firsthand here in Nigeria. If you sample the youth, you would see that those who are fairly exposed internationally are really moving towards gaining digital skills. There's just that mentality that is the future, and I think that is an opportunity to harness that interest alone and organize it. Anyone else want to share a comment on this point because I think it's quite important, especially in the context of Africa and many other low and medium income countries. Yes, please go ahead.
I think first of all, the using the digitalization in education in VET confirmed that the cost of providing the education is much more lower and does not reflect directly with economic development of the country. So this is a positive component that we have to use more and much more the new digital, let's say, tools in order to provide the right skills and future skills as of the countries in development. We did a model for financial or VET education in Kosovo, and we confirmed that if you use, for example, the Classroom 3.0 based on virtual reality and some other related part, you can decrease even to 60% the cost of VET financial education financing. So in this case, I think this is no alternative. There is no decision making to move forward to access the latest technology because it's not costly and increase the entire components, quality, accessibility, and many other aspects that we can have. I think there is the point that we have to move forward, and then using this advantage of you there and talent people, because now is the time to and talents are everywhere. So this is a perfect match to interact in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alexis. David, I need you to make it really brief, 30 seconds or less. Please go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just answering Fabian's question and maybe tying it to Alexis' contributions, I think one way we can leverage this demographic advantage is actually to strengthen the grassroots labor market information and skills anticipation system, to decentralize it to the vocational training center. You find that a vocational training center is always interacting with the employers and they are picking technologies as they come. But then the labor market information tend to be centralized at the Ministry of Labor or something like that. So you miss some of the innovations that the youths are playing with the technology that is around them. It doesn't come onto the radar, it doesn't come into the curriculum. So in the process, there's a bit of a mismatch. So I think part of the management training for TVET managers at the school level should be labor market information and skills anticipation systems. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right. Thank you so much. It has been very, very good. I think we are almost out of time, but perhaps I can take one or two last comments from our panelists. Anyone have any key message that you would like to share with the audience on this point? Please go. Okay. I guess then I would like to say many thanks to you. It's been really interesting learning about what everyone is doing. I think the future is good, and we all have to embrace this learning over the last 2 days. Thank you so much. And on that note, I'd like to again ask our audience, if you can, use the chat field to deliver with emojis, clapping emojis if you can, applause for our audience. With these virtual platforms, we can't hear you clap, so we have to improvise. It is the digital age. So thank you so much again to all our panelists.